Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. Kristen Phillips Hill is a state representative for the 93rd Legislative District here in the state of Pennsylvania. And she's brave enough to come in here to my lovely studio on a Friday and join me here on the Gary Sutton Show. And Kristen, thanks so much for coming down. You heard us on the air, and you just drove down here this morning instead of calling by the phone.
I did. Well, I'm fortunate. I don't have very far to travel, but I think you sound about as angry as I am right now. So I thought maybe we would come in and commiserate together. Well,
the temperature in this room went up about 10 degrees when you walked through the door, so we're in pretty good shape. It was running pretty hot then. I see this morning in the Philly papers where the Pennsylvania Senate approves budget bills, expansion of wine sales, and they also have the legislation to distribute $350 million in new school funding. I know the House came out with their version. It said $150 million in school funding, and a lot of people are, in this day and age where we trust very little of our government out there, are saying, well, where's that money going to go? Well, we know where Governor Wolf wants to send it. It's down to Philadelphia once again, at least a third of it. And a lot of people say, well, what are you going to use it for? For teachers who don't pay anything into their health care programs and for all these different kinds of union representatives they have? Is it going to make it to the classroom? We've seen money pounded in there before. We're not seeing very good results. So what's your take right now on where the budget stuff stands right now?
So, you're absolutely right. Actually, Jim Christian and I have a bill to get ghost teachers back into the classroom. A ghost teacher is a person who is employed by the public school system in Philadelphia who actually works full-time for the union. Now, there are gentlemen's agreements, nothing legally written down that, the union will pay that person's salary. That's great, except, we're still paying their pension contributions. At a time when they're telling us we have teacher shortages, we don't have enough nurses, let's get those people back in the classroom, right? You're absolutely right. You go on their website, you look at their benefits package, my goodness, you would be shocked. In addition to that, the way they distribute their benefits package, it's the union that does it. And if there's money left over, it goes into a fund. So they're sitting on over $20 million of taxpayer money in a slush fund that they're using to help finance buildings. We need to put an end to all of these types of practices because at the end of the day, we are shortchanging those children and we're shortchanging our taxpayers.
Let me ask you a question. Did the Senate cave in? Has the Senate, all these days out now, past the budget deadline, and you say, okay, and a lot of people have admired the fact that, Republicans were elected in there in the Senate and the House. You're one of them in the House. And I don't want to lay the blame on you here for the Senate vote just yet. But, the idea that you were in there to do something.
Absolutely.
You're in there to stand for something. And we heard during the campaigns what you stood for.
Yes.
Reforming the pension bill.
Yes.
Privatization of state liquor control. Doing something with property tax. And yet here we are again, right back where we always are and saying, well, why did you stay out if you're going to cave in close to what the governor wanted in the long run? He's getting $350 million. We don't know where it's going. We don't know how we're going to raise money to get it all there. And the governor, once again, is going to tax people more in the long run. That's what's going to have to happen one way or another. So people are saying at the end, why did anybody elect the Republicans to go in there if they're not going to stand tall? All these days afterward, when people are hurting, I got a note from someone the other day, Logos Academy is thinking about closing down in York. We're seeing people having to borrow money like crazy. And yet we all are still expected to pay our taxes, send them in on time. I saw in Bucks County the other week where they said, we're not sending it down there anymore. We're going to use it ourselves. And I said, where are the people with guts here in your county and our county commissioners to stand up and do the same thing and say enough is enough? We have no leverage.
Well, I think the first thing is, remember, it's not every senator. Certainly our senator, my district, the 93rd district, is the heart of the 28th Senate district. God bless him. He is a lone voice in the wilderness over there. He is doing everything he possibly can to get a better outcome. And I'm very fortunate. I'm in the House. We just introduced what are we calling it? It's an emergency funding measure.
Right.
It's a rescue budget. 40 House Republicans that said, look, we got to get that money out there. We're going to still continue to have this conversation, but people are hurting. The money needs to be out. We have voted time and time again in the House to make sure that the necessary funds get to our parochial schools to buy textbooks. The DCED, EITC credit approval letters are sitting there waiting to be distributed. That's not the House or Senate. That is the governor. The way that law was written, those letters could have gone out months ago. They haven't. We've been in touch with Logos. Logos is a great school. They're doing great things in the city for our kids, and they should have that money. And we have been pushing and trying to make that happen. But, look, the first tax vote that was taken was back in May. That's when Seth Grove put that amendment on and said, look,
right.
You can't spend what you don't have. If you want to spend this kind of money, then you need to put up a tax vote.
Which, by the way, I thought was a great move on his part.
It was brilliant, right? Not a single Republican or Democrat in the House voted for tax increases. And every vote thereafter, you can't get a tax vote through the House. So, the Senate passed this. And by the way, I have got this comparison that, a friend of mine who's really a great policy wonk put this together and shared it with me. Here's where the vetoed budget was. Here's where the agreed to budget is. And here's what the Senate passed. And the agreed to framework wasn't $30.8 billion in spending, a 5.6% increase.
Right.
We agreed to pension reform that would yield $12 billion in savings. Now we have a pension reform bill with collars that's going to defer $170 million, which down the road means we're going to pay $500 million on that. And we don't even have a PERC note that's going to tell us, what this is going to do actuarially. So, it could be worse than that. We don't know.
With all due respect, and all the numbers you read are good, most people don't give a damn about them. And what they do give a damn about is this. Number one, they agreed on a whole lot of items when we went in. On any kind of line item, the governor could have said, I'm going to make sure we do all those, and we're going to work on the areas that we have disagreement. That's number one. Number two, they agree that the pension system is not working. So if you come up with a hybrid where you still can kind of have something in there to please your union buddies that elected you to get in there, that's not good because it's still going to be there. Why not understand the idea that you got to put a new sheriff in town for new hires and say, here's what we got to do, figure out a way that you're going to fund the people that have already had promises made to them and go forward. That's what people understand.
Right. Right.
They don't, and the numbers, while impressive, most people aren't going to sit down and look at that, but they're going to say, we are trusting you as representatives to go out and be smarter and fix these darn things.
Absolutely.
Instead of talking them to death and figure out a way that you can kind of come up with hybrids which dodge the right and wrong.
Yep.
Hybrids are what you construct for the most part right now to put a middle in there when you really don't like the right or wrong answer.
You're right. Look, and we have to get back to the root cause, and you hit on it, which is our governor took an unprecedented action when he vetoed the entire budget, correct?
Yes, he did.
So, there's a lot of blame going around. Blame this leadership, blame that leadership. It's the House Republicans at this. Look, what is the root cause of any problem? Right now, the root cause of this budget impasse is the fact that the governor chose to take unprecedented action, veto the entire budget. Hadn't been done in 40 years, even though we agreed on about 68% of that funding. And that's how we, here we are today, and we're still battling out. I wasn't elected to bring hybrids. I was elected to be a steward of taxpayer resources, to make sure that our government provides those necessary programs and functions in the most efficient, effective way possible and the most fiscally responsible way possible.
Let me ask you a question. Why should people keep on putting money in taxes and sending them into the county, ultimately on to the state government, when I say you all, I'm not pointing to you, but I'm saying when you all in Harrisburg aren't doing your job, when you don't have to have your budget done on time, when you don't have to have the monies accounted for, why should we send that into a reservoir there to be collected and stagnate, or have the governor pick out the people he wants to send the money out to right now, which apparently he's doing.
Absolutely.
While it gains interest for God knows what. It's not gaining interest for and people are furious. People are absolutely furious. And so you see the things that happened like in Bucks County the other week. We apparently don't have the chutzpah to do that here in York County with our commissioners, but that's for another day. Why is it that we just take that? And how in the world can a representative or a senator or a governor, straight-faced, say to us, well, we're doing the best by you, when the governor turns down your stopgap measure the other week and says, no, it's all or nothing. How in the world can you say we care? I hear all these people talking about, we're going to help the middle class, we're going to do this and that. Nothing they're doing is helping the middle class. We just saw a report come out nationally yesterday that the middle class, for the first time since 1970, is outnumbered by the lower and higher class in this country. Middle class is hearing the words, and they become very, very empty, and they are furious out here on Main Street right now as to what's going on with them. Your thoughts?
Absolutely. Well, I think that, we have to continue to do what we have been doing in the House Republican caucus, and that is to make sure that we run our government responsibly. $30.8 billion in spending is not responsible. It's not. And here's the other thing. There is a huge amount of non-tax revenue. I think we could probably find almost $500 million in non-tax revenue that we could use so that we don't need to raise your taxes. No one's talking about that. And the spending that was identified, how can you continue to spend in an impasse when, we're not funding our schools, right. We're not funding our county human services? You're right. It's totally wrong, and it's not working well. Is government right now, and I agree with you, let's go find some ways. Scott Wagner was on my program the other week, and he said, listen, we could go through every department right now in the government, in the state government, and we could probably find the amount of money that you would need to fund it, and you wouldn't need to ask for another dollar. How in the world can the government ask for one more cent from Pennsylvanians? I mean, we have the 10th highest corporate income tax here in the country. The governor, we have the 10th greatest tax burden in the country overall. There you go. So you're absolutely right. We have a situation where we have a governor who wanted to tax Marcellus Shale even more on top of a impact fee, a C tax, because fee, tax, duck, whatever you want to call it, it comes out of your pocket, who wanted to do that. Apparently that's his big give in right here. He's not going to do that right now, but he'll be back later on to get it some other way. Listen, he's coming back. He's going to ask for all this year. He's coming back next year. He wants more. Right. This is not the war. This is just a battle. We're going to have to fight the next battle next year because there is absolutely no doubt that will be on the table going forward. You know what people have very little time for right now, Kristen, and this is one of the things that I think is troubling a lot of people out here. They have very little time for the ideologues like Governor Wolf. They have much more time for the pragmatic thinkers who are willing to find problems, be they have a D or an R in front of their names, a C or an L in front of their names, and go out and solve those problems. We are sick and tired of people playing around with our lives and sitting back and saying, you know what, that's more important than I get elected. And right now we see senators, for example, caving in on this budget because they're going to have to file their re-election campaign stuff coming up in January. A lot of us have that sense right now, at least the perception, that that's what's happening. We're going to come back and talk more with you about that. Need to take a very quick break, pay a few bills. We have to pay our bills here in WSBA, not like the state. We'll be right back with more on News Radio 910 WSBA. Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show with Kristen Phillips Hill this morning, the representative from the 93rd Legislative District. I remember years ago I was at a dinner one night, and then Representative Eugene DePasquale came up to me and he said, hey, can I talk to you? Because he and I were pretty good friends, and I still consider Eugene a good friend. He's a good guy. And I said, what's about it? He said, I've been up there now. I said, it's worse than I thought it was. He said, what should I do? And I said, come back with your honor. Come back with your honor. And come back and say why you are standing for certain things. Be you a Democrat or Republican. Eugene had to be a Democrat, but it doesn't matter to me. I mean, Democrats and Republicans are not devoid of good ideas. And I said, come back with your honor. Don't become, and I've had this theory for a long time, and you're a freshman in this house right now during this volatile time, Kristen, who goes in there, and I think we go in with the purest of motives, and we go in with the idea of, okay, we're going to represent our constituencies, and then all of a sudden, this little thing shows up called the caucus. And we have this bridge that you're invited to walk over into the land of caucusdom. And when you get over there, you're supposed to destroy the bridge behind you in the land of represent my constituents. How hard is it to stay true to your constituents and not march into the land of caucusdom? Well, I'm fortunate. I drive home every night, right? So I go to the Rudders in town. Right. I go to the bank in town. I I'm here, and I see those people every day.
Right.
And, I have been able to maintain my personal integrity and do what I need to do because at the end of the day, I term limited myself. I said I would do this for 10 years.
Right.
And, at the end of that 10 years, I'm just going to be a regular citizen back in York Township, going to church, going to football games, and I have to live with these people. So I need to make them happy. And, I certainly don't want to pick fights to pick fights.
Right.
But, those are the people I have to keep happy, the folks back home.
We see the Senate right now, and a lot of us would say, and I'd be one of those, saying they're caving in. We know that you have to file your re-election campaign stuff coming up in the next month or so in January. And so we see them caving in right now, all under the guise of, well, we're going to try to get something we can all agree to. One has to ask a question. Why is it the governor never really compromises? Why do the Democrats generally never seem to compromise? But Republicans always seem to have this compromising gene in them. And their compromise generally goes out and says, we'll violate our principles to get a compromise at the end because we're feeling the heat right now and we're going to have to get reelected. Any thoughts about that?
Look, I haven't been up there long enough to really understand the Senate. But this I do understand. I would rather go circulate petitions with a delayed budget or putting in place a budget that takes care of the people, not just, what everybody wants, but what everybody needs, which is to have government funded responsibly and circulate my petitions because you know what? That's what I was asked to do. And I didn't break my word to the people that I represent back home. And that's important to me. And I think that's important to the people back in the 93rd District.
I have an important question to ask you.
Okay.
And is the House willing to hold the line against the Senate here, not to pass a bill that they think is going to hurt us, not to pass a bill that's going to be a cave-in to the governor's will right now? Because this is an important time, I think, where the governor thinks he has a mandate, the state assembly thinks they have a mandate, and rightfully so. And so a lot of people are saying, well, if you cave in to pretty much what the governor wanted, or all these hybrids and things that don't really seem to solve any problems, which I think hats off to the State House for trying to do that with pension reform and so forth, although I don't think you went far enough. I think it needs to be much more stark than that because, 30 or 40 years down the line ain't helping feed the bulldog right now. Do you think that the House is willing to stand in there tough right now and fight back and get them back to the table and say this isn't the right way to go?
Look, I believe that the House is willing to work with the Senate to create a budget that is going to not overly burden people in Pennsylvania, right? So, here's the thing. Senate left. They passed the codes. They passed, we can get into all the bills that they passed.
Sure.
There's one bill that they didn't pass, and that's the revenue bill. Revenue, by the way, equals taxes, right? It's just a nice word for taxes.
Like investments, taxes.
Yeah, taxes. So, in the House, we actually have a bill. It's Rosita Youngblood. She's from Philadelphia. She's a lovely lady. She has a bill right now on second consideration that would close a loophole in the personal income tax. You don't have to pay income tax on your lottery winnings, right? Okay. So there is only one Democrat who has put an amendment on that bill, and that is Madeline Dean with a severance tax amendment, right? So if they were really serious about funding this, they would put the amendments on that bill, they would run that bill, and let's take a vote on those taxes.
Yeah. I mean, and here's one other thing, too. I read the other day where people were asked about what's going on right now in negotiations and say, well, it's secret. We really don't want to get the word out there too much because we don't want to ruin the negotiations. Whatever happened to going on PCN and doing this out in the open, huh?
Listen, I have sent things out to the people. I email blast every Friday. I have sent things out to people, and people would get upset. This is what's being talked about. I'm putting it out there. If you're upset, I want to know. If you're happy, I want to know. You tell me. I am there to represent you.
And I think, you got to get everybody else to kind of go along with that idea, Kristen, because I think that's the right way to go. Time flies fast when you're in here. Thank you for taking the time to be in with us this morning. We will be touching base with you again on this whole thing. And call your representatives, like Kristen Phillips Hill. Call your senators. Call your governor. Let them know what you think. Stay on top of this to the effect that you can because it's not open and transparent process.